All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our 5 steps to prepare for a cyber insurance policy webinar. Just real quick before we get started with our content, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So questions are obviously encouraged, and you can go ahead and find the questions panel in the bottom right hand of your screen. So feel free to submit any and all questions there. If it makes sense, I might throw some in during the presentation. Otherwise, we will address them during the Q&A portion at the very end of the webinar. And there will be one interactive poll towards the end of the webinar, so just keep an eye out for that. And you can just go ahead and click the answers on your screen. And finally, a recorded version of this webinar, as well as the slide deck, will be emailed to you all in the next couple of days. So just go ahead and keep an eye out for that. And as with all of our webinars at NetGain, it will be posted on our website as well. So my name is Maddie Regis. I am the Marketing Content Coordinator for NetGain Technologies, and joining me today is our Director of Security, Scott Logan. So I will go ahead and let him introduce himself. Scott?
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me here. My name is Scott Logan. I am the Director of Security for NetGain Technologies, and I provide security solutions for NetGain as a managed service provider, and also provide security solutions and recommendations and guidance oversight for different organizations, businesses, different verticals to help improve their security posture. So thank you again for having me here today.
Yeah, so Scott is our resident head honcho in security, so he's definitely got all the tools that we need to prep for cyber insurance policy. So let's go ahead and jump into our content. So we've got definitely some changes that have been on the horizon recently for cybersecurity in general, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, and this has actually affected the cyber insurance world as well. So you can kind of see we've got our some stats from our partner Arctic Wolf, and you can see in 2020 this huge jump in the number of breaches and the payout that cyber insurance companies had to give to various organizations. So obviously this was a big jump from past years, and it's had to kind of change how insurers are having to do business. And you know, as Scott and I kind of talk about this, we are not presenting the insurers as bad guys at all. It's the landscape has just changed so much that, you know, they can't continue to do business how they were with the amount of payout that they're having to give to organizations. So it creates some changes for you all as organizations in terms of possible increase in rates, possible coverage reduction or changes. So Scott, why don't you speak to that a little bit? What have your experiences in the field been with these changes?
Yeah, and working with different businesses and their ability to get insurance renewals and stuff like that, a lot of those questions of why are my challenges to achieve or to renew insurance so complicated now? What's happening that's forcing this? And these numbers are direct reference to why insurance companies are having to force this change on businesses. They've probably incurred a large deal of loss associated with coverage of cyber breaches. The amount of expenses that are required to recover from a breach like a ransomware can be astronomical. And so cyber insurance companies are repositioning how they're going to be able to support businesses with cyber insurance. Unfortunately, those challenges are making it harder on businesses to get those renewals. They're reducing their coverage, or they're extending their rates in order to cover themselves by making sure that your businesses are well aligned to be protective from cyber breaches.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to kind of discuss how you can pivot your organization as well as the cyber insurance world pivots. So I think we're going to kind of go into what has actually changed for cyber insurance. You know, what are the nitty-gritty details of these changes due to the large amount of breaches? And Scott, I'll kind of let you get into that with this slide.
Yeah, so historically, when a business was first registering or trying to acquire cyber insurance, they probably just had to answer a few questions, maybe provided a little bit of detail about their business's financials, but not really any great amount of information towards what particular controls or procedures were in place for the business. The insurance companies just didn't require it. And as a result, the insurance companies ended up putting themselves in liability of providing uh, a great deal of financial restoration or retribution for a breach that they weren't really aligned to do, or the business wasn't aligned to be protective against it. So that mismatch has really put insurance companies in a position where they have to force the understanding of certain controls that are going on in the business. And to the second bullet, providers are wanting more detail about what's going on. So you simply can't give them a information piece that I'm doing this control, I'm this control. They want evidence of it. They want to know that you're actually delivering on these controls. And some of the cyber insurance companies now are actually even verifying, they're testing against your ability to have these controls in place before they'll actually allow you to do it. The third bullet, new cyber insurance policies are now more detailed in the element of now they have specific addendums to what they're going to cover. There are going to be certain controls around ransomware, what they're going to do. Are they going to pay for a ransomware payment? Are they going to pay for business operational loss during a ransomware event? Are they going to pay for data exfiltration costs or losses to the business? So those addendums are very detailed now about where they're going to apply any level of assistance during those breaches. And make sure you read through those policies effectively. If you have a current policy, make sure you understand what's actually going to be covered by that policy going to assist you with. So you may be surprised about what they're actually going to be able to do for you. So make sure if you're going to renew, what you're going to need covered, that data exfiltration, understanding that amount of loss in your operations during a breach. Those things need to be specifically outlined in your policy about what your coverages are going to be. So make sure you read through your policies effectively.
Absolutely. I know I'm definitely guilty of not always reading the terms and conditions of everything that I do, but obviously when it comes to something as important as cyber insurance and your coverage, you definitely want to be aware of that. And again, I just kind of want to reiterate, the example that Scott provided of the ransomware addendums. Ransomware has increased exponentially since the pandemic. And so again, I think that's just an example of where these insurance providers are kind of having to adapt and pivot, because in order for them to still exist and provide you all with any sort of insurance and support at all, they've got to continue to adapt to the changing landscape.
Maddie, we work with a lot of different companies that come to us after they've fell victim to a ransomware attack. And we're really kind of surprised about where cyber insurance was going to step in and what kind of assistance was actually provided. It's different. Every single policy was different. Sometimes forensics assistance was provided. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's coverage of data loss or downtime associated to the breach, and sometimes it's not covered. So every policy is different. Make sure you know exactly what your policy is going to provide for you.
Absolutely. So now, I think this is definitely a question that might be on some people in the audience's minds. It's definitely something that we have heard from our clients. So why are these cybersecurity controls getting caught in the crosshairs of insurance? Why are these things kind of overlapping? You'd think that, they might not intersect the way that they are. So Scott, why don't you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Well, they have they need to be in the crosshairs of cyber insurance companies because the cyber insurance companies need to measure something against how you're actually structuring your security posture so that they can appropriate their insurance values behind that. If you build your house on a floodplain, there's going to be a requirement in your homeowner's insurance to include a flood insurance addendum. Why? Because you're on a floodplain. It's very possible that a flood will occur and there'll be costs associated with that. So they want to make sure their insurance is set up so that they're able to assist you financially in that type of effort. It's no difference in a cyber breach. Businesses have to be prepared to manage a cyber breach. They have to be preventive, they have to be protective, and they have to be restorable from an element of insurance coverability. That's what they want to measure against. And so those controls, just like the flood insurance addendum in a homeowner's insurance, those controls have to be understood in your cyber insurance. And that's the only way the business can ensure how much protection you're actually processing, what level of different controls are in place, what processes are in place, what policies are in place that you're using to organize your security posture, your security structure of protection, and that business, that insurance company can now measure that as how they're going to insure you, or if they're going to insure you.
Right. I think it's really the main way to verify that you are indeed actually taking steps to protect your organization. I think, as we kind of discussed before, Scott, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like prior to the past couple of years, it was sort of more taken on, an organization's word of like, yeah, we're protecting our business, we're taking care of cybersecurity, versus now they're like, no, we need to see this evidence. We need to actually see what actionable items you are doing in order to protect your business. Is that right?
Well, and that's right. And I mentioned that earlier, that they'll actually do now some verifications. They'll actually maybe run vulnerability scans against your organization to see if controls are in place or that assets are properly structured for protection. A lot of businesses right now, they're coming to us and saying, hey, I'm being denied insurance. I'm not able to get this renewed, or my current coverage is no longer going to be supported. They're not going to continue it. What do I need to do? And this is where the difference is. This is where the crosshairs on certain controls is element in the fact that insurance companies are no longer going to support you. They're not going to provide you insurance if your business doesn't have certain controls in place. And they're sending questionnaires out about those controls. Are you doing these things? Do you have MFA? Do you have EDR? Do you have these controls in place? Because they want to know that you're actually being preventive and protective against a cyber breach, so that they can properly align how they're going to insure you. So yeah, the crosshairs being on the controls is absolutely where they need to be, because that's how they have to measure how you're protected.
Right. Yeah. I think another analogy we could sort of use is like, if you have your brake lights out on your car, right, and you get rear-ended, you didn't have the proper measures in place to protect yourself. So the insurance payout is going to be a little bit different. So I think it's kind of similar for these controls. But
well, we've dealt with breaches. We've dealt with breaches before where the insurance company declined coverage because the breach was from an end user's mistake, and there was no educational platform provided by the employer to the end user to be effective in their understanding of threat. And so they denied the ability to provide them assistance during that breach simply because they didn't meet that responsibility.
Right. And so I think with that, let's kind of get into some of the things your organization can actually do so that you can avoid being in that sort of situation. So I think we're going to jump in here with EDR and MDR to start. So Scott, I'll let you roll with that first.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that are normally listed on a questionnaire for the insurance company. Are you effectively doing some level of endpoint protection or network level protection? Endpoint detection response, managed detection response provides that. They have the ability to monitor assets or monitor your network for threat and provide immediate notification of threat detection. EDR and MDR are different. EDR specifically is surrounding the endpoint and its ability of what is happening on that endpoint. MDR is more global to the network. It monitors everything across your network from the endpoint to the server, from the server to the perimeter. The network is constantly under monitoring, looking for bad habits, bad effective threats that are going on in the enterprise. So two very important amount of controls. I want to know what's going on in my assets, especially during the pandemic, and there's so many remote users right now. I need to have something that's on that endpoint telling me about anything that's bad that's maybe happening on that endpoint and providing the ability to be protected. So insurance companies are looking for that kind of control. Managed detection response, once again, it's more global. It has the ability to process or find threat as it's moving throughout the network and not just at the endpoint or asset.
Right, absolutely. So I think, yeah, the insurance companies are really, this is one aspect. We'll move through several that they're wanting to know that you are monitoring for threats to be able to identify them. So,
That's correct.
all right, let's get into our next point here, which is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So why don't you speak a little bit to that, Scott?
So multi-factor, the implementation of multi-factor into your organization immediately gives you a lift in your identity access protection. You're no longer dependent on a password as a single point of entry into your network. A password can be weak. A lot of enterprises do not force strong password requirements. And so those are easily brute forced. So what do I mean by brute force? That's somebody that's actually running a dictionary of passwords, thousands and thousands of passwords, hopefully going to force their way into your network through one of those weak passwords. We find weak passwords a lot of times on printers or low-hanging fruit of your network, not actually at your user levels, but something that has a simple password located on it. And those brute forcing are very effective in being able to break through those. By adding multi-factor into our principles of identification, now we're putting a second leg into that requirement of access, right? You no longer have just your password, but you have a PIN to your phone or something to that effect to be able to give a second authorization before you allow that connectivity, effectively avoiding any level of brute force being successful in your requirements. And a lot of compliance companies, now are pushing verticals towards having MFA as a requirement. So it's no longer just an insurance requirement, but also if you under compliance by association to your vertical, there may be a requirement of having multi-factor authentication in place as well.
Yeah, so we kind of got a 2-for-1 depending on what industry you're in. And I know, this isn't what this webinar is about, but obviously there's a lot of new compliance requirements popping up for various industries as well in addressing all these new cyber threats. So I think
you have to remember that if your password's compromised and that is the single point of entry into your network, and now you have an account takeover, not only are they effective to be able to do something within your network, but now if they're in the email processes for that user, they can actually deliver more maliciousness to any of their contacts that exists in their email platform. So you have to think of the fact that now they can actually send out something. I just received an email from Scott Logan at NetGain, and I trust Scott Logan at NetGain, so the email must be good, yet my account was compromised, and now that email that was delivered to them was malicious. So now I'm scrambling to contact everybody in my contact list, let them know that I've been compromised. MFA is an effective measurement to avoid that level of compromise.
Right. For example, at NetGain, we've got a Google Authenticator. So if I have to log in somewhere, I've got to have my password and I've got to have the Google Authenticator as well. So if for some reason my password was compromised, they don't have access to that authenticator. So it's sort of like a stopgap, right?
Yeah, and if you think about that, now the dependency to do your job also exists at your phone. You have to have your phone to be able to manage that MFA process. So think about that as well.
Yeah, well, and another point real quick that I would just want to touch on with MFA, because I know you've mentioned this before, Scott, is as someone who is not a cybersecurity expert, I was under the impression that the SMS MFA, you can, receive texts to your phone as a form of multi-factor authentication in addition to your password. I think, correct me if I'm not wrong, that's not necessarily as secure as having some sort of application, because that can be compromised as well. Is that right?
That's correct. Those texts can be grabbed and read as clear text. So you want to make sure that you use the application as a more protective model of MFA.
Yeah, and I think that's all important things to keep in mind when you're, trying to beef up your cybersecurity and show these cyber insurance providers, hey, I'm doing my due diligence, I'm doing everything I can to protect my organization. All righty, so we've got MFA. Our next point is managed threat response. I think this one's pretty cool. So Scott, I'll let you kind of talk about that a little bit.
Managed threat response is the ability to detect threat at the asset using several different methods of threat detection, AI, artificial intelligence, behavioral analytics, how something is trying to behave at that particular endpoint. Signature recognition is another great detection platform. But the ability to have something that is actually looking for threat is super important in the containment or protection of that asset. And having that done 24/7, 365, constantly looking for threat, doing that threat hunting and detection and response capabilities makes it an effective control that is very useful, especially once again in the COVID-19 times that there's so much remote working force that we need something that is constantly checking and looking for threat on those assets. They may have VPN channels back into my private network. I can't afford for them to become compromised. I need something that's very effective of being able to recognize threat that exists on that. And I want something that not only has the capability of notifying me, yay, but I also want to be able to execute against it through that platform. I want to be effective in being able to stop, whether that's a containment feature set or whether that's something that actually can dial into the actual threat and pull it out of the asset and verify that it's been removed, can be an effective control. So managed threat response is super important in a business for keeping that enterprise protected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of like, I always think of, let's say you had left your oven on when you went out somewhere. And it's sort of like the difference between just telling you like some sort of, app that said, hey, you left your oven on, versus being able to say you left your oven on and your fancy smart house has turned your oven off, so you don't have to worry about that when you're away from home.
Yeah. Let's don't talk about home stuff like that, because those are all scary kind of things security wise. But you're right in the effectiveness of how the control works, right? I wanted something that can sit there and say, hey, I left my oven on, and two, I've turned it off for you. That's an effective managed threat response type of example.
Gotcha. And actually, and so this is a great question. I'll add this in here instead of at the Q&A. Somebody's asking, what's the difference between EDR and managed threat response? So Scott, I'll let you go ahead and explain that.
Managed threat response normally has a SOC behind it. It has an actual third party that's monitoring for the threat, giving you the information of detail about this threat is doing this. EDR is going to look for threat throughout your asset, but as threat is introduced into the enterprise, it may be a bit before EDR can actually deliver any kind of notification to it. And it's just the notification of the threat recognition. It doesn't have that SOC intelligence behind it that a managed threat response system does.
Right, so the EDR is not going to be able to do this part, the executing a remediation effort. I think that's one of the most important distinctions.
The EDR can do device containment. It can do that type of thing. What I'm saying is that there's not a SOC behind it that's actually giving you the detail of information about the threat and giving you a remediation platform to deal with the threat. An EDR platform doesn't do that.
Gotcha. Well, that was a great question. I think I even learned something. It's a little bit of a clarification for me. So thanks for clarifying that for us, Scott. And let's move on to our fourth point, which is policy management, which is a pretty big one, I think. So.
Yeah, and this is something that's new for insurance companies are wanting to know, are you doing certain levels of understanding and policy and procedures? You know, I'm a CSO for a lot of different organizations. Every single one of them, if they're on this call, will probably raise their hand and say, yeah, he's just very diligent about our policies and what we're doing, and are we effective in our policies and procedures. And insurance is in the same boat. They're more focal. They're looking for backup and disaster recovery procedures. And one of the things that is new to insurance, but not new to good strategy or to good cybersecurity, is an air gap between their backups and their networks. Because if my network is compromised, I want to know that they can't get to my backups, that my backups are secure in the effort. And an air gap procedure can provide that. And when I say air gap, I mean a separation between the network and the actual backup device. Maybe they're separated by not on the same domain, or they have different accounts that can control them. But nonetheless, an air gap is a separation or segregation between your primary network and your backups. And they want to know, are you practicing that? Are you doing that? They also want to know if you're executing good incident response procedures, and have you verified your IRP? When's the last time you tested it? When's the last time you put it through its processes and verified the effectiveness of that particular policy or control? Vendor diligence, supply chain attacks are very high right now. Somebody getting into your network from a trusted vendor and initiating your compromise from their point of entry is something that is very high on the threat vector list. And vendor due diligence is very much required into understanding, are your controls, are your requirements of protection being practiced by your vendor association? And so they want to know, are you practicing good due diligence in your vendor management? And I mentioned air gapping being network segregation. They want to know, if are you doing separation across your entire network? Are you utilizing VLANs? Are you utilizing DMZs to keep your private network safe? To putting divisions, putting walls up between things. I don't want something that affects my plant floor to get to my accounting, as an example. And so good segregation platforms are also something that they're starting to look for in quality policy management.
Absolutely. I think one thing, could you give an example of the kind of due diligence and sort of what the insurance providers are looking for in terms of vendor relations? Could you just go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned the supply chain attacks, and what that means is I am breached because of an access point that was provided by a vendor. Well, it's my responsibility as a business owner to make sure that I understand the protections that vendor is providing. NetGain, as an example, we're an MSP for a lot of different businesses. We have a lot of doors into those businesses, so we have to provide an understanding of our due diligence of security and protection controls to that organization. We have to let them know that we're executing strong security controls, we're doing vulnerability scanning, we have all of our business associate agreements in line. We've done our own processing of understanding for our policies and procedures on a regular basis. We have to provide that information to businesses to let them know that we're secure. That's their due diligence. That's their responsibility of obtaining that understanding. And insurance companies want to know, are you doing that? Are you protecting yourself from a supply chain attack?
Right. And associating yourself with other secure businesses, essentially.
Yep.
So, all right, very good. So now on to our fifth point here, which I think is a pretty important one as well, which is social awareness. So Scott, I'll let you run with that.
So social awareness is so important in your enterprise of educating your workforce on how to be effective in recognizing threat. And a lot of businesses that I come across or I try to assist with, in some cases, where they come to us and they've been breached because of an end user's mistake in not recognizing the threat and allowing that threat into the enterprise, afforded them or disallowed them from being able to get assistance from their cyber insurance company. And so it's very important for your business to maintain a strong social awareness platform. The security of your end users from their understanding of threat recognition is your responsibility. It's not their responsibility to learn and understand and educate themselves about recognition of threat. It's your responsibility as a business owner to teach them and let them know what they need to recognize when threat comes across their endpoint. And a lot of businesses do not provide that continually. They provide it one-off, maybe on an onboarding exercise or maybe a one annual recurring type of educational platform. That's not enough. You need to continually educate them. Threat is changing all the time. So they need to understand that change in threat. They need to understand what they're supposed to look for and how they're supposed to react. What are they supposed to do when they see something that's threatening? Are they supposed to send it to a certain IT group? Is there a button on their Outlook that allows them to contain it or quarantine it in some way? They have to know what their processes are. And should they have a mistake committed, they actually do something threatening to the enterprise, that they know who to contact and what they're supposed to do with their asset in that effort of breach. And so bringing social awareness platform to your business is very, very important for maintaining your security. It doesn't matter how strong your firewalls, how strong all your perimeter controls are. Your end user is inside all those controls, and if they make a mistake on something that allows access into your network, like an email platform, it can cause disaster for your business. And so you have to be able to educate them and continue to do that. And now insurance companies are not only wanting to know, are you doing it? Yes, but you need to provide them the evidence of that training, of those programs. And so you make sure that you can provide them the understanding of, we're doing these recurring trainings. These are the results of our trainings. We used to have, 10 to 12 fail our tests every month, and now we're down to 1 to 2, or maybe even 0. If it's effective. They want to see that kind of process. So insurance companies are asking for that from the social awareness level.
Right. I think I could be the poster child for social awareness. When I first started at NetGain, NetGain was doing this social awareness training and testing, and I actually failed a test. I got a fake phishing email that I clicked on, and then I was, provided with some more remedial training. And as we've gone on, NetGain continues to do that. And so now I am easily able to identify phishing emails, different threats like that. And so I think it really just kind of goes to show how you can develop that within your end users, and then again show the insurance companies, hey, I'm trying here. This is what we're doing to protect the business from kind of human error and all these different social engineering tactics that hackers are attempting nowadays.
Well, I'm sorry that you fell victim to one of the phishing attack simulations, but it was effective in its ability to educate, and we've thus improved our security posture by improving your awareness. So that's the idea of those platforms.
Absolutely. And I think as an end user as well, it just makes me feel a little bit more confident. I'm not so scared that I don't know how to identify a potential threat. So I think it just it helps everyone from top to bottom in the organization for sure. So let's get in. All right, so we've talked about these kind of like top 5 things you can do, right? But Scott, now I kind of want you to discuss how the organizations on our webinar today can actually prepare for cyber insurance. Now that they know some of these controls that they should have in place, what are the next steps to sort of start either preparing for a renewal or a policy? So let's kind of get into that.
Yeah, so you made mention at the top, I don't work for an insurance company. I work for a managed service provider, but I deal with a lot of businesses that have the requirement for insurance, and I have reached out to a lot of different insurance companies and kind of received their information about what it is that a business should align themselves to, what they should prepare for in the effort of getting a cyber insurance renewal. And one of the first things that I found out was that the IT team that at an organization is not the only provision that needs to be ready for managing a cyber renewal. You need to have more teams involved in that. You should have your compliance team, you should have your legal team ready to go. Different teams from your organization, how you operate, is very effective in providing the correct information to your cyber insurance renewal request to get renewed. So it's very important that you don't just put that hat on IT. Other teams need to get involved. And you need to gather all your information, get it all ready to go before you start this process of going through a cyber renewal. get your preparedness and compliance with privacy regulations, understandings in place. You want to have that compliance control, what your compliances are, where are you in that effort of compliance. Maybe a recent audit would be an effective control to provide an insurance company about where you are in that, and how are you currently protecting your business from major cyber threats like ransomware. What are your controls that you're using to be preventive in those elements? Explain your backup procedures, business continuity, incident response plans and results. Have those ready to go if they're requested on a cyber insurance renewal. Get your vendor management information together. We mentioned supply chain attacks being something that insurance companies are wanting to know. Are you protected against that? So have your vendor management information aligned and ready to provide them. And because of the COVID-19 thing, they're wanting to know, what are you doing about your remote workforce? How are you being protective for those assets that are away from your business? What are your controls that you're using? Have that information ready to go as well.
Absolutely. We've got some more points here, so I'll just keep rolling with it.
Yeah, reviewing your current controls, you want to make sure that you're very expressive about what you're doing. And if you're missing a control, let's say that, I don't have MFA yet, as an example. Make sure that you provide them understanding about what you're doing about that, what your scheduling is for getting it deployed, where is it in your pipeline. You want to be able to let them know that you're aware of it and you're in process of improving it. That may be a very strong checkbox on getting your insurance approved. So make sure that they're very well aware of what controls you're doing, and anything that you're not doing, make sure you provide them an understanding about what you're going to do about that. And if you have any vulnerabilities in your network, something that a audit has identified, something that a vulnerability scan has identified, now's the time to do it. Don't be able to show your insurance companies that you're effective in managing vulnerabilities that are identified in your among your assets, and being able to provide them a result of your remediation effect. So be able to provide that understanding. Don't be blind to it. Don't simply say, I don't know what my vulnerabilities are. They want to know that you're effectively trying to manage that. And highlight anything that you've done. Provide them the understanding of what changes that you've committed to your network. Show them that, hey, we've added MFA recently. We've added a cyber insurance awareness program through KnowBe4. We're doing these effective controls, a managed detection response through an Arctic Wolf platform. We've added these improvements to it, and you're basically just showing them that these are the things that we're doing well. These are the things that we're very proud of, that we've budgeted for, that we've executed and provided into our organization to be more protective. They want to know that. And so that can be very effective in getting your insurance approved.
Right. So it's not so much a pass-fail situation. You don't have to be absolutely perfect, but they want to see you kind of demonstrating how you're improving and what controls you have in place is kind of what I'm getting from all this.
That's right. They want to know that you're aware of it and that you're doing something about it, and that you have a goal. You have a pipeline to say, I'm going to get this done in Q4. I'm going to get it done in Q1. And that can be very effective in getting it approved. Just simply by not checking the box, you're always afraid when you're doing your insurance questionnaires. I can't check that box. And that may stop me from getting my cyber insurance renewal. But if you can provide them understanding about what you're going to be doing about that box in the near future, that can be still very effective.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that pretty much takes care of our content here. So real quick, I just want to throw up one quick poll for the audience, which is just how can we help you meet your goals? You know, there's obviously a variety of things we've discussed here with both cyber insurance and cybersecurity controls in general. So want to know how can NetGain possibly help your organizations achieve some of those security goals or managed IT goals as well. And so while we have that up, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A here, and feel free to submit any last minute questions that you have. We will try and get to as many as we can here. So this is an interesting one. Someone is asking, what does Sophos XR cover? So I think that's more of like a specific solution. So Scott, can you speak to that?
Sophos XR or XDR is extended, and it extends it outside of just the asset itself. It goes to the cloud capability of detection and response. And so it's just an extension of the platform beyond the asset, from the endpoint to its cloud connection. It's not an extension to server and then perimeter. It's not that level of extension. It's an extension of what the asset can get to for detection. So anything coming from the cloud into that asset is under its detectable platform. So XDR is very effective in extending the amount of detection and response that an EDR stops at the endpoint.
Gotcha. So it's part of the EDR, MDR family. It's just kind of an extra step.
XDR isn't quite MDR. MDR is much thorough in tracking threat as it's moving throughout the enterprise. XDR is an extension of EDR from the endpoint perspective.
Gotcha. Okay, and oh, this is a good one. All right, so will doing all of these things that we've discussed today on this webinar reduce insurance costs, or is this just the bar, kind of like a bare minimum for getting insurance, I think is what they're asking.
All right, so it's probably the baseline for getting insurance. Every insurance company will be different as far as whether it's going to reduce your rates or not. You need to reach out to them and provide them the understanding of the controls you're using and see if they're going to reduce your rates. No harm in asking that, hey, if I add this, will it help reduce my insurance coverage? But every single insurance company is going to be different in their response to that. But it is a great baseline for providing strong controls to be able to be effective in getting your cyber insurance renewal.
All right, well, good to know. And then one quick thing that I did just want to clarify on, nobody's asked about it yet, but just in case, we did use the acronym SOC a couple of times, which is just a Security Operations Center. So it's kind of like eyes behind glass, people actually keeping an eye on your environment in order to help you stay secure. So I did just want to clarify that just in case.
And it's more than just people. Security Operations Center is full of security professionals, right? So there are people that are trained and certified to be able to recognize threat, to be able to provide you the insight of how to remediate that threat. So a SOC is a very important part of threat management.
Absolutely, yeah. So I know there's a lot of acronyms in cybersecurity and IT in general, so I like to always just clarify that. But all right, we got a couple more questions here. So I think, all right, I'll start with this one, and there's one that's a little bit similar to one we've already gotten asked. But first question I've got here: what one control would you recommend adding to their organization's cybersecurity posture to provide the most influence in their cybersecurity?
Wow, of the 5, I assume, to rank them 1 through 5, that's a challenge because every single one of them I could put at 1 for any one particular reason. I'm going to answer it in this way. Probably the most common method of attack that exists is email, and having a MFA second leg of protection associated to my email to protect me from account takeover and brute force is super important to do it. I can put social awareness at the top too, having your end users trained. That's a tough question. I really don't know if I can sit there and say maybe that'd be a 1A and a 1B. That's hard to determine which one of those controls. Every single one of those controls that I've mentioned are effective in improving your security posture and can be very effective in getting your insurance renewal.
Very good. Okay, so really the answer is a little bit of all of the above, but I think.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, so our last question here is just, I think we sort of went over this, but just to reiterate, what's going to be that first step for an organization that's looking to get started to either to renew a policy or, possibly for just to apply for everyone in the audience, possibly get a cyber insurance policy for the first time? What's going to be that first step that they need to take in order to prepare?
Yeah, if you remember the 5 steps I listed, that number 1 is to get your teams ready, to get the players involved that can provide the information to your cyber insurance company so that they can make a great understanding about where your security posture is and how they're going to provide your level of insurance to protect you. Having just the IT team deliver that is a mistake. You're probably not going to represent yourself as well as you may be aligned to be protected, and your cyber insurance company won't know what you don't tell them. So make sure you get a great team together of every single department that can provide that level of understanding. And once again, going back to compliance, going back to maybe accounting, IT can be a big player in it, but they're not the only ones that should wear that hat.
Gotcha. Very good. All right, let's see. Okay, we actually got one more that somebody just popped in, which I think is an interesting. So somebody's asking if their email in theory was found on the dark web, is there a need to change their username or just their password?
Wow. I haven't had that question before. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Their password, actually. I mean, you can change their username to kind of move them completely away from it, but you want to change their password. You want to change their password to everything that client or that user has access to. That user needs to be notified that their information was found on the dark web. It was under compromise. We've changed your network password. We recommend that you go out and change your bank passwords, your social media platform passwords effectively, because a lot of times users, and it's very unfortunate, but they share their passwords across different platforms. So make sure that they're aware to change those passwords across.
All right, that was a good question. Okay, we keep getting them rolling in here. Just as I think we're done, we've got another one. I think this is a really excellent question. So this person's asking, if we're brand new to all of this as a small business, should they just start going down that 5-step list that you mentioned? You know, they're saying we don't have any real big teams or anything. It's just kind of the owner and the office manager. So how does a small business like that get started with all of this?
Well, I mean, if you don't have the separation in the organization, having different teams and stuff like that, then it is what it is. But the next bullet on that was what you need to start putting together and getting your policies and procedures together, getting your understandings of your trainings and verifications done, getting your vendor due diligence together, and having that information available for cyber insurance is going to be effective in being able to get you approved. So just because you're not large enough to have multiple teams or different compliance owners and different owners of administration, that's fine. But be ready in having all that information collected and delivered to them. So if you're just a single point, single hat, that's fine. Just make sure everything about what you need to deliver them is organized and prepared.
Very good. And so I think, all right, let's see here. One last. So who can kind of help with that documentation if someone is not sure where to get started and kind of how to put all that information together? Are there certain kinds of organizations that can help put all that together? I'm leading this question a little bit. I hope you can tell where I'm going with that, Scott.
Yeah, I can. We have a special program at NetGain that we offer clients called Essential Security, and it has a CSO program, a Chief Security Officer program, that can help provide businesses an oversight and direction for their alignment associated to administrative policy and procedure, their technical controls and physical controls, but mostly to the point of policy. Where can they go to get that? We can provide examples and templates for what policies need to be structured for, and so that you can align your current policy around those templatized understandings. There are also businesses out there that will write policy for you. We do not write policy, but we can provide you an understanding of what businesses are out there that are capable of providing or writing those policies for you. But we can provide you direction. And if you have current policy, we can provide you understanding is your policy properly aligned? Does it contain all the elements and factors that it needs to contain to be an effective policy? We can provide that understanding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was not just a plug for NetGain. I just want everyone to understand that there are organizations out there that have this level of expertise, us being one of them, that can help you if you're not totally sure where to start, or just kind of want an extra, more expert set of eyes.
We didn't invent CSOs, so there are CSOs out there.
Absolutely. All right. And oh, this is a good one. All right. So how can a security assessment help an organization with all of these these policy changes? And I mean, I would argue just in general.
A security assessment can provide you an understanding of your risk levels. And risk levels will be identified about how appropriate your security controls are for your assets, your data, your people. And that recognition of risk helps align you with how your security posture needs to be structured. It can identify gaps in your security posture. It can position the element of this particular control is in place, but it's not as strong as it needs to be. It requires a level of maturity to be more effective in its ability to provide protection. And a security assessment can help provide that. By having that understanding, if you remember going back to what insurance companies are looking for, they want to know, do you recognize your threat? And if you find things that are gapped, things that are not in place, and an insurance security risk assessment or a security assessment can provide that understanding, you're providing them details about how you're going to address it, what you're going to do about it. And so a good security assessment program will help you have that understanding so you can deliver it in a cyber insurance request.
Yeah. I think I think it just kind of helps you become more aware of what's going on in your environment so that you can give them as many answers as possible, which again is kind of the goal of this whole webinar, is to help you all be able to prepare your organizations and hopefully receive cyber insurance based off of your security control preparation. So.
Agreed.
Alrighty, well, I think those are all the questions that we have in the panel. And if you have any other questions or anything that's maybe more specific to your organization that you don't want to discuss on the webinar, feel free to contact us at the information on the slide. We are happy to help. As Scott explained, we have experience assisting organizations with this many times over. So feel free to reach out. And thank you, Scott, for providing your expertise today.
Thank you,
everyone. Thanks for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, everyone, and hopefully we see you on the next webinar.